The large ship hung over Seoul like a dark cloud. People stopped in the streets to look up. Cars halted. The world seemed to hold its breath. Ambassador Kim stood on the landing pad, trying to stand tall despite her fear. She wore her best suit, chosen carefully for this historic meeting. Behind her, military officials whispered among themselves. "They're coming down," one of them said. A beam of light shot from the ship to the ground. When it faded, strange beings stood before them. Their skin gleamed like metal in the sun. Their eyes were large and dark. They moved with odd grace, as if gravity affected them differently. The leader stepped forward. Admiral Drac was taller than the others. His uniform was covered in strange symbols that shimmered when he moved. "People of Earth," Drac said, his voice oddly smooth coming from such an alien face. "The Galactic Imperium welcomes you to the greater community of worlds." Kim bowed slightly. "We are honored to make contact with your civilization." Drac made a gesture that might have been a smile. "Your world has been within our records for some time. We have watched your development with interest." Kim felt cold despite the warm day. "You've been watching us." "Of course. The Imperium spans thousands of worlds across multiple star systems. Earth sits in a quiet sector we rarely visit, but you are still within our borders." The officials behind Kim shifted nervously. This wasn't how they had imagined first contact. They had expected equals, perhaps, or at least negotiations, not this calm statement of ownership. "We have come to formally bring Earth under our protection," Drac continued. "You will now enjoy all the benefits of being an imperial world." "And what benefits are those?" Kim asked carefully. "Defense against cosmic threats, access to trade routes, knowledge sharing, though limited to appropriate technology levels." Drac's strange eyes fixed on her. "But protection has its price." Here it was. Kim braced herself. "What price?" "The same all protected worlds pay. 10% of your planet's resources each cycle, 1% of your population for service in imperial forces or labor projects." Kim's mind raced through calculations. 10% of Earth's resources would cripple many economies. 1% of the population meant over 70 million people. "That's impossible," she whispered. Drac made that strange smile again. His teeth seemed too numerous, too sharp. "Not impossible. Simply required." "Our people would never agree to this," Kim said, finding her voice. "We cannot surrender our citizens or our resources on these terms." "This is not a negotiation, Ambassador," Drac said. "This is how the Imperium has functioned for 10,000 years. You have one standard cycle to prepare your first tribute. After that, regulatory action will be taken." "What does that mean?" Kim asked. "It means worlds that refuse tribute are made examples of," Drac said simply. "You have seen your own history. Surely you understand how empires deal with rebellion." Kim felt sick. Behind her, she heard the military officials muttering angrily. "I must consult with Earth's governments," she said finally. "Of course," Drac nodded. "We will remain in orbit. Your leaders have exactly one cycle to reach their decision." The light beam appeared again. The aliens stepped into it and vanished, returning to their ship. Kim turned to face the officials, her hands shaking. "Get me the president," she said, "and contact the UN. Tell them we face the greatest threat in human history." As Kim walked away from the landing pad, she looked up at the massive ship blocking the sun. For centuries, humans had dreamed of meeting aliens. Now that dream had become a nightmare. In government offices around the world, phones began to ring. Emergency meetings were called. Military leaders studied their weapons and knew they were facing something far beyond their capabilities. Humanity had 1 year to find a way to resist an empire of thousands of worlds or face destruction. The clock was ticking. The big meeting room in Geneva buzzed with worried voices. Leaders from every country sat around a large round table. Screens on the walls showed pictures of the alien ship that still hung over Seoul. "Please, everyone." Secretary General Okafor raised her hands. The room slowly fell quiet. We have only 11 months before the Imperium expects our answer and our tribute. The word tribute made many in the room shift uncomfortably in their seats. Captain Lee stood up. He was a small man with a serious face who rarely smiled even before aliens arrived. Now, he looked even more serious. Our best spy planes and satellites have gathered this data, he said, pressing a button. New images appeared on the screens. The Krellin ship uses energy we can barely detect, let alone understand. Their hull is made of metals not found on our periodic table. President Garcia from Mexico leaned forward. What about weapons? Can we fight them? Lee shook his head. With all our nuclear weapons, we might damage one ship, and our sources say they have thousands. The room fell silent again. The hopelessness of their situation hung in the air like a bad smell. We cannot give them 70 million people, said the Prime Minister of India, breaking the silence. And we cannot give them our resources. Many nations are already struggling to feed their people. But we cannot fight, said the President of Russia. So what choice do we have? Ambassador Kim, who had met the aliens first, spoke up. There must be a way. Every empire in history has fallen eventually. Every powerful force has a weakness. This is not some empire from history books, said the Chinese president. This is an alien force with technology we cannot understand. Captain Lee nodded. Their smallest weapons could destroy our largest cities in seconds. They can travel between stars. We've barely reached our own moon. Secretary General Okafor looked around the room. Are we really considering surrender? Giving up our people and resources until Earth is blood dry? What choice do we have? Someone repeated. From the back of the room, a quiet voice spoke. There may be another option. All heads turned. Dr. Choi had been so quiet that many had forgotten she was there. She was older, with gray hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. Dr. Choi, Okafor said, please share your thoughts. Choi walked slowly to the front of the room. She didn't use the digital screens. Instead, she picked up a marker and went to an old whiteboard at the side of the room. For 15 years, my team has studied what you might call dimensions beyond our own, she said, drawing a series of lines and circles. Most people think we live in 3 dimensions, plus time. But the math shows there are more. Some leaders looked confused. Others leaned forward, interested. From studying the Krellin ship, we've learned something important, Choi continued. Their faster-than-light travel uses the 5th dimension, but they ignore the 6th completely. What does this mean for us? The British Prime Minister asked. It means they have a blind spot, Choi said, tapping the board. Their communication systems, their sensors, their weapons, all rely on the same dimensional technology. But our research suggests we can create a disruptor that works in the 6th dimension. A weapon? Captain Lee asked. Not exactly, Choi said. More like a shield, or a way to hide. The Krellins wouldn't be able to see us or communicate with their homeworlds. For the first time since the meeting began, people sat up straighter. Eyes grew more alert. How sure are you this will work? Okafor asked. Not sure at all, Choi admitted. But it's better than surrender. And better than a war we can't win. Captain Lee nodded slowly. We would need time, resources, every scientist who understands this field. And we would need to make the Krellins think we're preparing to submit. Ambassador Kim added. We need to buy time. Okafor looked around the room. The mood had shifted. Where before there had been only despair, now there was a tiny spark. Then we have a plan, she said. We pretend to prepare our tribute while really preparing our defense. Dr. Choi, you have the full support of every nation here. As the meeting continued into the night, the leaders of Earth began to believe that maybe, just maybe, humanity would not bow to the stars. The day of tribute came. The skies over major cities around the world filled with ships. Smaller Krellin vessels had joined the main ship that still hung over Seoul. They watched everything that happened on Earth. For the past year, People had worked in factories and mines. It looked like they were gathering resources for the aliens. Long lines of cargo trucks moved to spaceports built specially for this day. Tears ran down many faces as 1% of the population, chosen by lottery, boarded transport ships. Admiral Drac stood on his command deck, watching Earth's surrender with cold eyes. "The humans learn quickly," he said to his officers. "Most new worlds resist longer." On the main screen, he could see the human leaders gathered in a field outside Seoul. They wore formal clothes and solemn faces. Ambassador Kim stood at the front. "The first transport is approaching, Admiral," an officer reported. Drac nodded. "Bring it into the landing bay." The first large transport ship, crewed by Krellin standards, moved slowly toward the flagship. Inside, cargo boxes were stacked neatly. They contained metals, rare earth elements, and other resources the Imperium valued. What the Krellins didn't know was that each box also contained a small device. Dr. Choi's dimensional disruptors looked simple, just metal cylinders with blinking lights. But inside was technology that had taken thousands of scientists working around the clock to create. On Earth, Kim watched the transport dock with the alien ship. She touched the small device in her pocket. It was time. "Admiral Drac," she said into the communication device the Krellins had given her. "Earth presents its tribute with respect and loyalty to the Imperium." "Accepted," Drac's voice came back. "The Imperium acknowledges Earth's submission." Kim took a deep breath. Around her, world leaders bowed their heads as they had practiced. It looked like surrender. It was not. Kim pressed the button in her pocket. Inside the transport ship, the disruptors activated. More devices hidden in other ships waiting to dock came to life. Across Earth, in secret underground facilities, larger versions of the same technology powered up. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Admiral Drac's communication officer turned to him with confusion on his alien face. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the fleet." Drac frowned. "Check the systems. All systems are working. But there's nothing there. It's like the rest of the Imperium doesn't exist anymore." On his screen, Drac could see the human leaders still standing with bowed heads. But something was wrong. They weren't acting afraid anymore. Kim looked up directly at the camera she knew was watching her. She smiled. "Admiral Drac," she said, "Earth does not surrender. Earth does not submit. And as of this moment, your ships can no longer communicate with your empire." On the command deck, alarms began to sound. The ship shook slightly. "What's happening?" Drac demanded. "Some kind of dimensional interference," an officer said, panic in his voice. "It's affecting our drive systems, our weapons, everything." "Impossible." Drac slammed his fist down. "These primitives can't have such technology." But they did. For the past year, while pretending to gather tribute, Earth had been preparing its defense. The people chosen by lottery were actually soldiers and scientists, trained to operate the disruptors from inside the Krellin ships. Across Earth, the fake submission turned into real celebration. People poured into streets, looking up at the alien ships that now hung powerless in the sky. In hidden bunkers, military leaders watched as the dimensional shield expanded, cutting off the Krellin fleet from their empire. For the first time in thousands of years, a sector of the Imperium went completely dark. On the command deck, Admiral Drac watched his systems fail one by one. He turned to his communication officer. "Send an emergency signal to Imperial Command. We need reinforcements." The officer tried, but nothing happened. The message went nowhere. Drac turned back to the screen, where Kim still stood, now with a smile on her face. "What have you done?" he demanded. "We've created a dimensional bubble around Earth," Kim explained. "Your signals can't get out. Your ships can't leave. For the first time, Admiral, you're as alone as we were." Drac's face twisted with rage. "You will regret this, humans." Kim's smile faded. "Probably. But we would regret submission more. The battle for Earth was just beginning. But for the first time, humanity had hope. The sky burned above Seoul. Beams of energy shot down from the Krellin ships, turning buildings to dust. Admiral Drac had given the order just hours after the dimensional shield went up. If he couldn't contact his empire, he would make Earth pay. Target their largest cities first, he commanded. Show them the cost of defiance. Cities around the world faced the same attack. New York, London, Beijing, Tokyo, all suffered under Krellin weapons. Millions died in the first day alone. But Earth had not been idle during its year of fake submission. Deep underground, vast shelters had been built. As the attacks began, billions of people moved below ground. They crowded into tight spaces, afraid but alive. In her underground lab, Dr. Choi worked without sleep. The dimensional shield had worked. The Krellins couldn't call for help. But they still had powerful weapons. We need to turn our defense into an attack, she told her team. The same principle that blocks their communications could affect their ships. Above ground, Earth fought back however it could. Small, fast ships had been built in secret. They couldn't match Krellin technology, but they were piloted by brave men and women willing to die for Earth. Captain Lee led these forces. His ship was little more than an engine with guns attached, but it was fast. Hit and run, he told his pilots. Don't try to fight them directly. Strike their fuel ships and retreat. 3 months into the war, Earth's position looked grim. Half the surface was uninhabitable. The Krellins controlled the skies completely. But underground, humanity survived and planned. In her lab, Dr. Choi finally had a breakthrough. It's ready, she told the world leaders gathered around her table. She pointed to a device the size of a small car. The quantum inverter. It can turn the Krellins' own dimensional drives against them. How does it work? Secretary General Okafor asked. Their ships use the fifth dimension for power. This device forces that energy to flow backward. In simple terms, it makes their engines attack themselves. But it must be placed on their flagship, Ambassador Kim said. How can we do that? All eyes turned to Captain Lee, who stood quietly in the corner. I'll take it, he said simply. The mission seemed impossible. Lee gathered 40 volunteers, all knowing they would likely die. They modified their fastest ship, stripping away everything except what they needed to carry the inverter. The night of the mission came 6 months after the war began. Lee's ship rose from a hidden base in what used to be the Amazon rainforest. Stay in the clouds, Lee told his pilot. Head for Seoul slowly. The Krellins had become used to shooting down Earth's ships. But this one was different. It used no metal the Krellins could detect. Its hull was made of materials developed just for this mission. As they approached the flagship, Lee gathered his team. Once we're inside, we have 15 minutes to reach the engine room. The inverter must be placed directly against their main drive. The small Earth ship attached itself to the flagship like a tick on a dog. Special tools cut through the hull, making no sound in the vacuum of space. Lee led his team inside. The Krellins were not prepared for enemies inside their ship. The first few they met died before they could sound alarms. But soon the whole ship knew they were under attack. Keep moving, Lee shouted as energy weapons fired around them. Men and women fell, but the team pushed forward. In the command center, Admiral Drac received the alert. Humans? Inside the ship, impossible. But the reports kept coming. The humans were heading for the engine room. Lee lost half his team before they reached their goal. The engine room door was sealed, but they had prepared for this too. Special explosives opened the way. Inside, Krellin engineers turned in surprise. The remaining humans fired, clearing the room. Set up the inverter, Lee ordered. Only 10 of his original 40 remained. As they worked, Krellin soldiers began to break through the barricaded door. Almost there, one of Lee's team called. Admiral Drac was rushing to the engine room with his guards when he felt the ship shake. What was that? He demanded. No one had time to answer. The flagship's engine began to glow strangely. Energy flowed backward through systems never designed for such reversal. In the engine room, Lee saw the inverter working. He smiled as the walls around him began to warp and bend. "For Earth," he whispered. The flagship twisted in ways that should have been impossible. It folded into itself, caught in a dimensional collapse. And then, to the watching eyes of Earth's remaining defenders, it simply vanished. The other Krellan ships, suddenly without leadership, fell into confusion. Some tried to flee, only to crash against the dimensional shield. Others continued to fight, but without coordination. In underground bunkers across Earth, people looked at screens showing the flagship's disappearance, and they began to hope again. The starship Defiance moved silently through space. Its hull gleamed with a blue light that came from its quantum engines. These engines were a mix of Earth science and Krellan technology, better than anything the Imperium had ever built. On the observation deck, Ambassador Kim looked out at the stars. She was older now. Gray streaked her once black hair. Lines marked her face from years of stress and hard work, but her eyes were bright with pride. "Ambassador, we're approaching the Krellan system," the ship's captain said. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. Kim nodded. "Thank you, Captain. Is the transmission ready?" "Yes. We can broadcast to the entire system whenever you give the word." 5 years had passed since the day Captain Lee and his team had vanished with the Krellan flagship. That day had turned the tide of the war. Without Admiral Drax's leadership, the remaining Krellan ships had fought among themselves. Some had surrendered. Others had been destroyed by Earth's growing fleet. Dr. Choi's dimensional technology had been the key. After the war, she had worked to adapt it for travel. Now Earth ships could move between stars faster than even the Imperium ships could. With this advantage, humanity had expanded quickly. They found other worlds that suffered under Imperial rule. Many welcomed Earth ships as liberators. "The Brel system thanks Earth for their freedom," the leader of one world had said. "We have paid tribute for 300 years. Now we stand with you." World after world joined what became known as the Terran Accord. Not an empire, but a partnership of free planets. Each kept their own government but agreed to work together. The Imperium was in chaos. Without faster-than-light communication, they couldn't control their vast territory. Entire sectors broke away. Imperial ships found themselves cut off, unable to call for help. Now, 5 years after first contact, the Defiance led a fleet of 50 ships from 20 different worlds to the heart of the Imperium itself, the Krellan homeworld. "Ambassador, look," the captain said, pointing out the window. In the distance, a planet came into view. It was surrounded by space stations and ships. This was Krell, the center of the Imperium for 10,000 years. "Are they preparing to attack?" Kim asked. "No. Our scans show their weapons aren't powered up. I think they're confused. No enemy has ever reached their homeworld before." Kim smiled slightly. "We're not here as enemies." She walked to the communication station and picked up a small device. With one press, her words would reach the entire Krellan system. "This is Ambassador Kim of the Terran Accord," she began. "We come in peace." On Krell, the Imperial Council watched in shock as human ships appeared near their planet. How had they traveled so far? How had they broken through Imperial defenses? 5 years ago, your empire demanded Earth's submission," Kim continued. "You asked for our resources and our people as tribute. You threatened our world with destruction if we refused." The council members looked at each other nervously. Many had not even heard of this distant, primitive world when tribute was demanded. It had been routine. Just another planet added to thousands already under Imperial control. "Today, we come not for revenge, but with an offer," Kim said. "The Terran Accord believes all worlds should be free. All people should have the right to choose their own path, even the people of Krell." This was something new. In all its history, the Imperium had never faced a power that didn't want to conquer or destroy them. "We offer you membership in the Accord, equal partnership with Earth, and all free worlds. No tribute, No submission, just cooperation and mutual defense. On Krell, people gathered around screens showing the Earth ships. For generations, they had been taught that the Imperium was necessary, that without it, chaos would rule the galaxy. But now, they saw another way. The choice is yours, Kim finished. But know this, the age of empires is over. The age of freedom has begun. The Defiance waited in orbit, its quantum engines humming softly. Inside, Kim looked out at the Krellan homeworld and remembered the day their ships had darkened Earth's skies. How far they had come since then. No one knew what the Krellans would choose, but for the first time in 10,000 years, they had a choice, and so did every world in the galaxy. The Imperium had demanded Earth's submission. Instead, humanity had given the stars their freedom. The end.